For tonight's story, we go to the suburbs of Cincinnati. Houses that all look similar, green grass, flowers, neighbors that are waving at you and smiling while thinking vicious thoughts about you in their head. And this story starts with a 21-year-old named Brian in his childhood bedroom in his parents' house in this suburb in Cincinnati, and he's at the foot of his bed in praying position, and he's half whimpering and half crying and half sort of pleading, and next to him is a stack of all of his favorite albums. He loves rock and roll, he loves country, he always has. And tonight he knows deep down that this is going to be the last time he ever hears any of that music. You see, recently, Brian has really started taking his faith a lot more seriously. The way it should be, if you were to ask him, and he was having trouble finding a church with people as intense as he was, as devout as he was. And it seemed to him a lot of these people were just there for the community and the friends, and no one was getting serious about it, really serious about it. But that all changed because recently Brian found a new church, a Pentecostal church, and his new friends at this new church, they accepted him for who he was. They celebrated his intenseness and his devoutness. And finally, he felt like he had a community. And he's sitting there on a Sunday night. He hasn't really eaten much recently, hasn't slept really much recently, but he has had a breakthrough with his new friends at the church, and he feels like that maybe is causing the lack of sleep. And he's sitting there, and he's crying, and he's got a baby face and red hair, and he's got his big man body, though, already, with big forearms and hands, and he's crying, and he gets up and he starts pacing around, and finally he grabs all of his albums that he loves so much and he slams them into the wastepaper basket, and he stomps on them over and over again, breaking them, and finally falling back, breathing heavily, relieved. To say that his parents were worried is an understatement. I mean, that's all they did is worry at this point. Brian had a healthy relationship with his faith for the longest time, but recently it seemed to really get intertwined with maybe a mental issue. They didn't, every time they asked Brian about it, he would tell them that their souls were going to hell, and it was just a really hard time for the household. And this night, so that was Sunday, when he's sitting there praying and begging, and then ends up smashing his records. And so 2 days later, on Tuesday, his parents in the same house, his dad already had fallen to sleep, but his mom was laying there just worrying. That's all, it felt like that's all she did these days. And she had a bit of a cold on her nightstand. There's NyQuil and a used Kleenex and a couple cough drops, and it's just that uncomfortable feeling. And on top of that, she's just so worried about Brian. He's hanging out with these new Pentecostal friends, and at first she was just happy that he was talking about some friends. I mean, you can imagine a young boy that even the thought of curse words is way too much for him. Brian hadn't cursed in years, and he wouldn't allow it around him. He had no trouble going up to someone that said a cuss word and telling them that it was not good and that they were going to go to hell. And you can imagine the looks that this young kid got after telling someone they're going to hell after cursing. And it was just a nightmare situation. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to get him help. It seemed like his new Pentecostal buddies weren't helping anything and were giving Brian more confidence that he didn't need to go talk to somebody. And at some point, his mom drifted off into a NyQuil-induced, horrible, cold sleep. And sometime later, when Brian's mom and dad are sitting there or laying there sleeping in bed quietly with the comforter with flowers on it pulled all the way up, the door of their bedroom burst open. And that feeling, they had no idea. They pop up, the light turns on, and it's Brian, and it's in the middle of the night, and his eyes are black saucers, and he's holding a pamphlet that says, "I fear for your souls." And he starts kind of preaching, and the dad, he's seen this state before. He knows it has nothing to do with the religion, or he knows there's no point talking to him. So the dad pops up with kind of an automatic efficiency of almost like a firefighter when the alarm goes off. So the dad pops out of bed, puts his jeans on, and knows the best thing when his son is in one of these states or episodes is to get all the car keys, move the car. There's a whole list of things he has to do. And so he pops up, gets his jeans on, makes eyes at the mom saying, I'm going to go deal with the car keys and stuff. She makes eyes back, and Brian approaches her. Imagine being woken up. You've got a cold. All you've been doing is worrying about your son. You've got it up to here. She had patience and wanted to support his faith, but at a certain point, enough is enough. And he woke them up in the middle of the night, and he's got the stupid pamphlet, "I fear for your souls." And for the first time in the whole situation, she lost it on him and said, "Brian, what the fuck are you doing? It's enough already. Enough. What is the matter? We need to get you help." And Brian went cold and expressionless. He had never heard a cuss word come out of his mother before. And he turned around slowly, and he walked back down the hall to go to his room. Shut the door. The mom now is sitting there going, "Ugh, darn it," okay, and she kind of gets her wits about her. The dad is off somewhere moving the car. There's also a younger brother, a 17-year brother to worry about and deal with, and the mother kind of gets her head, and she walks down the hall to Brian's room, and there's a soft knock on the door. She's totally in control again. She says, "Brian, are you all right?" She wants to come in, and she slowly pushes her way into the bedroom, and Brian's eyes are these two horrifying black dots. They're dilated. He's obviously going through something, so she just wants to calm him down. And Brian describes this moment in the story when she came into the bathroom or into the bedroom, where he calls it her spirit. He said, her spirit said, "Tell me about the Bible." And he starts to preach to her, and she's thinking, she doesn't know what to do. She's in the room, and then there's a quiet. He stops, and he's obviously hallucinating or something, and then the silence is broken. He just explodes and starts screaming, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" And the mom is thinking, okay, all right, this is a little bit different than the normal episode. Okay, I'll get out. And so she leaves the bedroom thinking, okay, I'm just going to go to the garage, see what the dad is doing. But Brian follows her, and he keeps screaming, "Get out! Get out!" And then he starts saying, "Get out of her!" And she doesn't know what to do. I mean, think about it. This is in the middle of the night. You're just trying to keep your poor family together. It's your son. He's sick. You don't know what the hell to do. And so she goes into the garage to try to find the dad, and Brian follows her into the garage. And Brian describes this part. When they were into the garage, all of a sudden her face distorted horrifyingly. And he couldn't even look at it. And every time he did, it would distort and change and contort in horrible ways. And his mom is standing there, bare feet, in her nightgown, just not knowing what her son is going through. And Brian hears a voice in his head that says, "Kill it." And he starts to shake with fear. And again, the voice says, "Kill it." And he's shaking and he's crying and he looks, and there's a baseball bat leaning up against the garage next to a hula hoop and golf clubs that no one used since the late 90s. And he picks up the baseball bat and he beats his mother to death with it in their garage. And a BBC reporter 20 years later would go interview him. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity, not fit for a trial, and for the past 20 years, Brian has been living in a psychiatric hospital in Cincinnati where he goes to therapy and he enjoys playing ping pong. The documentary crew got some nice footage of him playing ping pong with a big smile on his face. And they talked to his doctor. And, they said, "What's the story?" And obviously he's got a lot of issues. They diagnosed him with schizoaffective bipolar type. And usually with inmates, or I guess patients like him, the longer they're in there with good behavior, they get moved to less strict areas, they get a lot more privilege. And his doctor said that he is the one patient that for 20 years his behavior has been perfect, and they refuse to move him because after 20 years he refuses to even question whether his mother was possessed by a demon that night. And one of the last moments of when the BBC guy's talking to him, he asks him, and his brother and dad don't talk to him anymore, court ordered, but they asked him if part of talking to your dad and your younger brother again, would you admit that your mom was not possessed by a demon that night, or Satan that night? And before, as he's been interviewing, he has this childlike quality to him. He's wearing a Dallas Cowboys shirt. Yay. Wow. And when asked that question, his eyes turned black, and his face got serious, and he said, "No, I can't do that." Happy Halloween, everybody.